Hey friends, since it's getting closer to the end of the season, I'm clearing through a lot of master content and intending to farm it, but when I'm looking for players who are aware of how difficult it is and are geared and are prepared, those numbers are kind of lower than I would like, and I want to do something about that. I want to make a write-up, a very simple guide so you know what to follow and can checklist off options so that you are ready to farm master content in an LFG setting. I'm calling this document, the PvE Efficient LFG Ready Write-Up. And it's going to be very generic so you can handle anything the game throws at you. I know that there are more specific and better strategies for specific bosses, and I would push you towards a channel like Aegis and that spreadsheet to really try to min-max and do even better. However, in my experience, if you're expecting to find players that are the best of the best, have all of the gear, and know how to speedrun, you're probably not going to fill a group very easily, so this guide is more generic, so it's realistic that you can fill a team of 6. Before getting into the write-up, I want to mention a World of Warcraft video called Why It's Rude to Suck at WoW. While I do see some parallels in this write-up that I'm about to read to y'all, the main takeaway to get from watching a video like that is to be very clear in your expectations with the fire team that you're asking to fill. For example, if you have a more laid back and fun approach to the game and you main Chaos Reach no matter the situation and want to use that on every raid boss, you need to be upfront with that information when you're asking other players to help you finish a raid, because it's kind of selfish and entitled to expect that you can do whatever you want while expecting other people to do the bulk of the clear for you. I'm not saying it's wrong to have fun in a game like this. Just be upfront so you can build an entire team of like-minded individuals who are cool with spending the extra amount of hours that it could take on a clear or not clearing at all. For some, it is just the journey, not the destination. Without further ado, here goes the write-up. This guide is focused on not just clearing, but farming master content and the most endgame activities the game has to offer, like Pantheon. Yes, I am optimizing the fun out of the game. The game is not balanced. Some options are significantly superior to others, and in my opinion, I find PvP more fun than PvE, so I would rather spend as little time in PvE as possible. I'm not asking for 100th percentile damage rotations and Grandmaster knowledge, knowing every nuance of the game. I just want everyone on the same page to try their best to respect others' time, commitments, and place on their skill journey. Be honest and clearly spoken, be patient and willing to learn new things, because remember, PvE is not second nature to every player. Try to empathize and remember your own skill journey on anything in life you struggle to get a grasp on. Attempt to bring other players up rather than abandoning them at the first sign of conflict, and at the same time, don't tolerate toxicity and be willing to disband and rebuild a team. It's worth your mental. It is faster and more efficient to minimally gear all 3 characters than it is to spend extra time curating specific requests in LFG scenarios for long farming sessions. In other words, it's easier to be the Well Warlock than it is to request one. It's easier to bring an extra Thundercrash Titan to Atrax than it is to just hope other people in your team show up as that. However, I will mention, for a brute force clear, almost any combination of classes and strategies will clear any piece of content in this game. Bungie does not make these tasks impossible to clear. They make it so Thunderlord will clear everything. But this guide is not focused on clearing, it's focused on efficient farming so you can get back to the things you enjoy in the game. Over the course of a season, you will end up saving more time by having the flexibility of other classes and loadouts on tap. You'll also be able to accommodate friends of lower skill for more comfortable clears. For PvP players, you will save time towards building your ideal PvP loadout by first equipping yourself properly for PvE. For LFG discords that I frequent, I will try my best to help you farm out any or all of this gear if you ask, and I will workshop any strategy or loadout that you need practice on, because the more members we have willing and able, the more likely it is to get stuff done. With the preamble out of the way, let's talk about how to gear. First, get the 1810 power chest at the Hall of Champions, and grab the Caress exotic armor on Titan. Then go to the helm, talk to Marasov, and look up the Riven's Wishes. You're going to complete these, and then use the token to buy Cenotaph on Warlock, or you just pay attention to todayindestiny.com for the Lost Sector rotation and hope that it's helmet or whatever armor piece you need to properly gear your character. The standard speed loadout for almost any Lost Sector clear is Gallahorn and then champion mods. This season, I believe it is Overload Rocket, so that's what you use Galley for. It's also just good in general. Use any of the seasonal vendors to unlock high stat armor options. Try to use your Ghost mod to set to Resilience and shoot for a 100 Resilience setup on all recommended loadouts in this guide. This is a passive grind though, because after I believe you get rank 10 at the Riven vendor, you will just passively start accumulating engrams and you can turn them in there. To level up that Riven vendor, you can just collect resources in the Dreaming City for a few hours, or you can go a different route like the Deep Dive Sonar Station or whatever it's called. I made an entire free-to-play guide recently, so check that out if you want more specifics, but otherwise, getting high stat armor is not a problem, and if you really want to min-max, you wait for Grasp of Avarice to roll around, and then you farm that. But you don't necessarily need that. A lot of times when I'm clearing master content, I'm just swapping stuff in my inventory until it hits 10 resilience, and then I don't care about the rest because I'm clearing anyway. Next, use your spare exotic ciphers on Izanagi's Burden, Grand Overture, Witherhoard, Sleeper Simulant, and if you have an extra, maybe Lumina. Obtain the following. For the Into the Light weapons, I recommend Edge Transit with Envious Assassin or Autoloading Holster, plus Bait and Switch. You can also get away with Explosive Light and other similar grenade launchers. I would advise getting a trace rifle in both the kinetic and the energy slot, and there is a list of trace rifles on the screen now. Then go for Warlord's Ruin Sidearm. There is a solo farm that I'm going to mention in this video and show off, but Indebted Kindness is a workhorse. It is probably pound for pound the best PvE special weapon in the entire game, and even just any roll will do and will help you clear. But ideally you go for Lead from Gold plus Volt Shot or some other damage source. Next up, any sniper rifle in each kinetic and energy slot. Recommended kinetic, Succession or Supremacy. Recommended energy, Aikilo Sniper. A fusion rifle in both slots. For the kinetic, go for Scatter Signal. It's from the Riven vendor. You go for Overflow Control Burst. Then you want a utility one. A Chill Clip fusion like Riptide from Crucible, or you get Deliverance from the Raid, which will be buffed in the future so that it freezes on 2 shots. Then any energy. Eremite, Royal Executioner, Cartesian Coordinate, Techioon Force. And then ideally a boss damage perk setup on your energy one. Like, I guess I had Vorpal Weapon, Lead from Gold, maybe you can go Controlled Burst on Techioon Force. There's options. You want a shotgun in both slots with 1-2 punch. This is mostly for your Titans. Wastelander, Swordbreaker, Aikilo Shotgun, Retold Tail. Really any of them work because you just want the punch damage. Next up, do the Whisper of the Worm exotic mission and unlock at least the field prep upgrade. I've been a little lazy about this myself and can confirm you can still get it done with just the Whisper breathing, but it is a nice bonus to have. I have had runs cost from just 3 extra bullets of Whisper missing from the team. Outbreak perfected from the 0-hour mission. This is a good backup weapon for when your team's entirely out of ammo, and if everybody's on the same page switches to Outbreak in the menu, it can save a run where you're missing 3 Whisper bullets. Next up, Rocket Launcher for boss damage. The easiest option is to use 5 Ribbon Wish tokens on a craftable Apex Predator with Reconstruction and Bait and Switch. But in general, the good blueprint for a rocket launcher is any perk that auto-reloads or significantly speeds up or skips the reload, Autoloading Holster, Clown Cartridge, Demolitionist, Field Prep, etc. And then a damage perk like Explosive Light, preferably Bait and Switch, but just put a damage perk there, that's the least you can do. And if you don't own a rocket like this, be upfront and mention it to your group ahead of time, and either plan on being the Gallahorn user, use Dragon's Breath, Two-Tailed Fox, something like that, or have the entire group switch to grenade launcher strategies, which means that as long as you're not reliant on Gallahorn, they could be using a mix of Sleeper Simulants, Linears, grenade launchers, whatever they're comfortable doing high damage with, and try to talk them out of using Thunderlord. Next up, any burst damage options, Parasite or Grand Overture. Parasite is very specific in this week of Pantheon because there is a Solar Surge, so that is worth mentioning. I did put an or here, but ideally, you get both. Next, support options are appreciated but not necessary. Divinity, Tractor Cannon, and Lumina. There is a chance that if everybody bystanders this, you just will not have them in the fire team, but they are not necessary and you can just skill issue your way to hitting all headshots without divinity anyway. Bonus: staple weapons with different elemental types to take advantage of activity modifiers like surges. For example, Cataphract is a Strand grenade launcher and Edge Transit is Void. So on a Strand Surge week, use Cataphract, and on a Void Surge week, use Edge Transit. Next bonus is Eager Edge Sword for movement. It is worth taking the time to search on YouTube to properly learn how to well and shatter skate to save your team a lot of idle time during jumping puzzles. Now, moving on to the next section of the video, this is character prep. Before going through the character prep list, it is worth mentioning a common team building theme. Of the 3 classes, Warlock is the easiest to play and often the most appreciated in groups. It is not recommended to start a 6-man activity with less than 2 Warlocks. And I'll mention the well and whatever nerfs that we recently got in 12 later. This guide was written before that. It's fine to have a few Titans and Hunters exclusively on a damage super. Ideally, every team has a Well of Radiance, a form of Weaken for the boss, and fill remaining players on damage supers or backup wells. In the rare case of too many Warlocks, they swap from Well to Nova and Needle Storm. Titan requires the knowledge gap of Strand Titan to be universally useful, and a basic guide will appear later in this write-up for that. However, just being on Arc with Cuirass will suffice as the damage super, but you might be called to switch to a Warlock in dire situations like Crota Zen using swords. Now, Hunter. Hunter is overrepresented in character mains in this game, and that often leads to a shortage of other classes. As a result, it makes sense to keep the most competitive Hunter player on Hunter and ask the other players to swap to Warlock or Titan. To competitively play Hunter, you need to have all meta relevant builds on tap and be willing to menu swap for extra damage, as in you switch from Orpheus Rig to Lucky Pants or something like that to squeeze out even more damage to justify you staying as a Hunter, because to be honest, if you just geared a Warlock, you would probably have cleared by now. It's too early to speak on Well of Radiance nerfs and how that affects the meta, but I would assume that because most of the boss's health pools, you can comfortably do 60% of their health pool with 6 players geared with current meta. I would say taking 1 player or 2 players out for Void Titan banner shield rotations, maybe a Renewal Grasp on top of a Well. There's a lot of options, and even if you substitute out those things, I still think with the damage options we have for LFG teams, you're still able to clear 50% of the health bar each time anyway, so you're still going to be fine. This guide's still going to be relevant. Just keep your finger on the pulse of what is getting the clears in LFG and have those things ready to go. And maybe I update this in the future. Moving on to the next section, try to obtain all of these suggestions, but at least prioritize the bare minimum section on each character. For Warlock, your bare minimum is Cenotaph or Aeons, then Lunafactions, then Sunbracers. Yes, Sunbracers are getting nerfed, but they're still the best. Just like when Resilience got nerfed, it's still the best. For Grandmaster Nightfalls, you either Cenotaph everything, or you plink away with Phoenix Protocol or Battle Harmony. For extra damage, if you want to make sure your team hits that damage threshold, use Rain of Fire to Icarus Dash and reload your rocket launcher with 4th Horseman as your filler damage, or you could do something like Sanguine Alchemy with Izanagi's Burden, which allows you to spec into kinetic surges to squeeze out just a little bit more damage. For specific encounters like Vault of Glass, you would use something like Verity's Brow Exotic Helmet and Fusion Grenades to completely destroy Atheon. Like, it's worth just telling your entire team, go to Rahul, get a Verity's Brow, switch to Dawnblade, and rejoin the activity, and we will clear this faster than banging our heads against the wall, not using Verity's Brow. For Titan, your bare minimum is Cuirass, Exotic Chess Piece, Synthoceps, and Aeons. For extra damage, Worm God Caress and Pyrogale Gauntlets, and you could be menuing between all of these like I do. For Hunter, your bare minimum is just Star Eater Scale, and you need to be prepared to play that on all subclasses. If you're the only Hunter, you're typically asked to play Tether, but if there are multiple Hunters, 1 Arc Throwing Staff, then the rest can go Blade Barrage, and I think that's very comfortable. There's also, of course, the extra damage Hunter options like Celestial Nighthawk, Radiant Dance Machine, so you can constantly reload a rocket launcher, and then Lucky Pants with Malfeasance or Warden's Law. And once again, if you really want to squeeze out that extra damage, you are menuing all between the different boots and everything in your character. You might start with a Nighthawk pre-pop, menu over to Radiant Dance Machines, shoot Nighthawk, empty all of your rockets, do another animation like a manual reload or something, while you menu to Lucky Pants, and then rip the boss with your remaining Malfeasance or Warden's Law. Does that sound really extra? Yes, that's because it is, which is why I recommend just making a Warlock and dumping rockets in a well. It's way easier. For GM Nightfall recommendations for Hunter, we have Omnioculus, Orpheus Rig, Gear Falcon Hauberk, or Aeons. Now that you know all this knowledge, let's talk about generic encounter preparation. For most bosses, it's going to be a rocket or a grenade launcher damage strategy. For long range or crit specific bosses, use Whisper of the Worm. And then I guess I learned in Pantheon, Sleeper Simulant can be kind of good at Nezarec, but I don't think that's the meta yet. Wait for a more solidified strategy that most players agree on before you just take that one for granted. In general though, for any encounter, 1 Well of Radiance, 1 Weaken, 1 Damage Super. This will change a little bit in the future, but even if you still do this in the future, you will still clear. So 1 Well of Radiance. For getting to the boss damage phase, use Sunbracers, Aeon Swap, or Cenotaph. Swap to Lunafaction or Rain of Fire for the damage phase if you want to squeeze out some extra. 1 Weaken. That is a Tether Hunter with Star Eater Scale or Orpheus Rig, or a Tractor Cannon Strand Titan with a Navigator present on the team. Navigator makes a grapple point so that the Titan can repeatedly grapple melee, and this does change in the future. This might mean we finally get to use a Strand Hunter for our damage rotations, since they can make grapple points for just using half of their grenade, and that also reloads their gun. It can be pretty cool. A little too specific for LFG, but I thought I would mention it. And then for emergency situations, you can use any Void class with the Weakened Grenade Fragment. I've had to do that sometimes on Grasp of Avarice farms, where I use an Armamentarium Void Titan just to have an extra Weaken. You could also use the Throwing Shields. There's a lot of variety for this, but I don't recommend it. Just use this for emergencies only. Then 1 Damage Super. This is your Caress Thunder Crash, your Pyrogale Burning Maul, Star Eater Blade Barrage, Celestial Nighthawk Golden Gun, Star Eater Gathering Storm, Nova Bomb, Needle Storm. And then above all, if you take one thing away from this video, it is this. You run triple reserves on your chest piece to rally, and triple surge on your boots when you deal damage to the boss. I personally get lazy sometimes and just keep them both on, even though if I was really tryharding, I would have some sort of damage resist on my chest piece and some sort of scavenger or auto-loading holster on my boots to get me to damage. Then I menu to the proper triple surge and triple reserve to kill the boss. Let's mention some specific encounter preparations just in case you want to farm these. For Crota's End, it's typically a sword encounter, but this could change with the Well of Radiance changes in the future. I anticipate maybe you'd be using like rocket launchers or grenade launchers on the top towers in this case, but let's just talk about what we have right now. Obtain a sword of each element. Lament for Solar Surge, Falling Guillotine for Void, Bequest for Arc with Surrounded, which does change the sword strategy just a little bit in Crota. The Slammer for Stasis, maybe Relentless and Bait and Switch. It sounds a little rough, but that surge would be worth the extra damage. You bring at least 4 Wells of Radiance, or you planned on some convoluted 6-strand Titan strategy with blocking the sword to live. For Vault of Glass, use Verity's Brow with Enhanced Fusion Grenades. For Deepstone Crypt, Atrax, Parasite or Grand Overture, and then all damage supers, but I think Thunder Crash is the most consistent. Finally, I'm going to leave you with a Strand Titan guide, since I did mention it's necessary to play all of Titan in raid encounters. And I'm going to oversimplify this as much as possible, so that as you start practicing the class, you'll know what to search for to find more detailed information. Use Banner of War and Into Fray aspects with Thread of Ascent and Thread of Warding fragments. Your main weapon loadouts involve swapping between 1-2 punch shotguns, tractor cannon, navigator, and some sort of other filler primary weapon, trace rifle, or sniper. Your loadout involves Synthoceps or Worm Gods depending on the encounter. Typically, you build up Banner of War stacks by first getting a melee kill, then continuing to get kills of any kind. The goal is to get as high stacks of Banner of War as possible before going to the boss phase. For high health targets and bosses, use either a 1-2 punch shotgun into the ability melee, or a 1-2 punch shotgun into a grapple melee. Strand afflicted targets, when killed, will drop a tangle. Pick these up and either throw it at the ground for woven mail or throw it at the enemy and you can grapple onto the tangle to save yourself a grapple cooldown. For bosses, you or someone on your team will typically set up a grapple point above the boss, and this is mostly done through the Navigator Exotic Trace Rifle, but hunters can supply this as well. Your damage rotation is Tractor Cannon and 1-2 punch shotgun grapple melee. A great place to practice this is what you see in the background right now. Warlord's Ruin first boss, but most GM Nightfall opening areas are also great playgrounds to practice this. This was a lot of information here today, but if you go through and checklist each of this and have it ready to go and on tap, you will clear faster than banging your head against the wall with suboptimal setups for all of this, and you will be invited to repeat farm with these groups more often than not. I really hope this write-up helps round out your own LFG friend group. Best of luck.